gamers? Cutie Patootie here, and I'm here to give my honest opinion about Knights Templar. It's been about 10 days since the whole subathon started, and since when we had creator preview, and now the game release as well a couple of days ago. So I feel like I have enough games played that, you know, I don't understand the Civ fully perhaps, like every little bit of thing and every little unicom, but I kind of want to give my opinion just about general playstyles, what the Civ I think is going to end up at, what the Civ is like now, and so on and so forth, potential problems or good things about the Civ. And yeah, let's get started. We got Wham in here. She's doing a painting, so she's very, very focused. And she's doing a work of art. Look at that. Let me just show it. That looks good. I'm just saying. My honest opinion about that thing, amazing. Knights Templar is one of the two new civs that came out, and there's a very interesting mechanic with it, which is the age up mechanic, aka you don't have landmarks in order to age up. You age up in your town center, so you lose villagers. Now, initially I thought this would be a big disadvantage when I started playing, because you just lose 3 villagers, but there's a lot of economical ways to kind of back that up. If you age up, even though you lose 3 villagers, if you consistently have pilgrims going to the sacred site, you kind of make up for that disadvantage, because you're just constantly getting gold, and as long as that gold is trickling in, yes, you have less villagers, but you're same economy, or maybe even slightly better than your opponent, because they give you 130 gold per trip, and they summon once a minute, so they give you 260 gold a minute, which is very, very good. But obviously, some maps it's very hard to do that. Some maps civs will deny it, and so on and so forth. The other side, so I was kind of thinking initially, well, the problem is if you don't go for pilgrims, you're then behind on economy. But there's an interesting thing in how the numbers work for Knights Templar and wood gathering, and I'm going to try to open up, I'm trying to find a thing that Crackety sent to me. It kind of gets minimized a little bit, even if you don't go for pilgrims. So this is the gather rates on wood for KT and gather rates for a normal civ. So if you guys don't know, Knights Templar have increased wood gathering rate because they don't have double broadaxe, but they also don't need to build lumber camp, so that's very good. On top of that, 20% of the wood that gets dropped off is dropped off as food. So these are the stats that Crackety sent to me. I believe they're correct, but they're not. Someone can say something, right? So in Dark Age, you gather 38.5 wood per minute per villager, and you get 7 food per minute, right? Normal Civ gets 31 wood per minute, and I'm assuming this includes, you know, stuff like travel time, dropping off to lumber camp, and so on and so forth. So this is the interesting part. If you go double TC, and there's a build where you can get a second TC at 4 minutes, even though you have 3 villagers less, because you can start your TC so early, and because your wood chopping villagers gather more wood, you do have same or more income than your opponent. Does that make sense? So in Feudal Age, let's say you go 2 TC, your second TC is a lot faster than potentially your opponent, so you will catch up a villager or 2 from the age up. But on top of that, your villagers are gathering not 10 wood per minute only, you're also getting 9 food per minute. So each villager on wood is giving you 19 resources extra per minute compared to the opponent villager on wood. So there's this weird thing where if you actually go 2 TC, this is a bit complicated because numbers, but if you go 2 TC and then you don't chop wood, you are behind on villagers. But if you go 2 TC and you open up with, like, let's say 10 villagers on food, you're even or ahead than your opponent, right? So because of that, with Knights Templar, it's a civ that doesn't necessarily want to rush castle, because by rushing castle, you're actually not keeping up with your opponent in a way, right? And all your mechanics and the way the civ works, it doesn't make much sense to rush castle in the first place. But if you do go to town center, you can do something like that. But if you go 2 TC into chopping wood, you're actually ahead in your opponent, right? So there's a lot of interesting things like that with Knights Templar that I think all the intricacies and stuff we're gonna figure out. Like this game, I went to TC, and then I went into trying to go fast age up with pilgrims. So I was still kind of chopping wood a little bit here and there, but I try to go pilgrim age up, so go super fast age up. So yeah, these are the things that are going to be still tested, and I find this really cool and really interesting because it brings out a lot of options and a lot of math and a lot of calculations of how Knights Templar is to be played. And in no means do I think we figured out the best way to play them. Okay, there's going to be some super optimized builds with like wood gathering or 2TC or whatever for people to figure out what the best way to do this is. Now, that being said, Knights Templar in water is completely broken. It is the best civ by far. So, previously best civs were HRE, Jushi Legacy, and China. And they were basically just dominating every other civ. So the difference between those three civs and like Delhi on water and Malian on water is the same difference that it's Knights Templar to them. In terms of how good it is. Almost like 5-6 minutes into the game, Knights Templar has like 200 more income per minute already, which is it's crazy. And that's with 3 villagers less, right? You're 5 villagers ahead in economy. Because on water maps, Knights Templar don't need to drop off wood. You don't need to build lumber camps. And you get food when you drop off wood. So it's just like, it's insane. So I think, in my opinion, they need to be nerfed on water, but there's an interesting way that I thought of you can nerf them without actually affecting the civ in any other way. Some people suggested nerf their wood gather rate or do this or do that, but you don't need to do any of that. All they need to do is increase the ship costs for them, and that's it. Because they have more economy, so if you increase ship costs, that would balance them out to be more in line with the other civs, while still being very good because you don't need to drop off wood or build lumber camps, right? So, for example, if fishing ship is 75 wood, maybe make fishing ship 100 wood or 125 wood. I don't know. There's math to be done there to see what's balanced, right? But if galley is 150 wood, they can make it 175 or 200 wood or something like that, just to offset that massive advantage that they have. And if devs don't do that, the civ is completely broken on water maps, which is a bit of a shame because if we have any tournaments happening and there's a water map, Knights Templar were guaranteed to get banned just because of the water map, so we're not actually going to see it played at all. Now, pilgrim system is very interesting. Now, I have done a lot of testing with pilgrims. I've done, you know, I have a guide on YouTube where this is the first build that I've done that I kind of made because it made the most sense to me, which is you age up with the French age up and you kind of go double pilgrim and then you just make knight archer. It's a very simple build and you get a lot of income, you get a lot of units, and you just kind of go. Now, I've tested a lot with fortresses. I have tried 2 fast pilgrims into like only knights and then very fast fortress in feudal age. The problem is if you go very fast fortress in feudal age and you put it on sacred side, the opponent can just attack you in your base, and because you invested 900 resources in fortress plus the villagers and walk time, you're just gonna die. So it actually makes no sense to make fortresses in feudal age unless you're trying to like do some kind of weird all in and you're gonna fortress drop your opponent with a lot of units. Other than that, fortresses in feudal, not worth it. If you want to do it for economy, it's better to just make a second town center. If you want to do it to protect your pilgrims, it's better to just make units because one fortress will not cover everything. Then I've done some testing with 2 town center into age up into like Templar brothers and then fortresses, because by then you have more villagers, so you can kind of create fortresses easier. That did not go well either. So I've come to a conclusion that initially I thought you're going to be a civ that you kind of build up fortresses around the map in order to secure, in order to increase the pilgrim count, and I thought that's your economy. Like, all your goals should be from pilgrims. And while that sounds really cool and really nice, it doesn't work like that. Basically, you should look, in my opinion, based on the games that I played, you should look at fortresses from Knights Templar like a keep from any other civ. Would you age up in castle and just make an immediate keep? Would you age up in castle and 2 minutes later drop a random keep? Not really. You only drop keeps when you're securing like big goals or Sacred Side win or something like that. And that's how, in my opinion, Templar fortresses should be built as well. And the only difference is you get Pilgrim as like a bonus. So you shouldn't look at it like, I'm going to build a fortress to get Pilgrim gold income. It's more of, I'm going to build a fortress when I actually need it, like with other civs. But I also get a Pilgrim for it. So, yeah, I don't think any kind of fortress securing early map or anything like that works. Another thing, if you build them too early, your opponent can just make a treb and just treb you down, and because you invested so much in your fortresses, you have no units to defend it, so you're gonna lose it. That being said, I think their economy is very interesting the way it works. I'm still not very used to it. I probably have about 30-40 games with them, maybe a bit more, I'm not sure. Maybe 50, I don't know. And I'm still not used to the economy. I feel like oftentimes I have like no gold and then I have 5,000 gold. So it's obviously unique. It's hard to balance out, you know, to do it properly, but you know, we'll get there. Now, let's talk about their Commandry system, which is the age-up system. I think this civ will be very painful to balance at the top level. The sheer amount of choices that you potentially have is, I think, impossible task to balance. And I think almost always there will just be a better thing, and you just go for that. The reason for that is, if we look at the, and I'm talking about, by the way, I'm talking about top level games and tournaments. If you're lower league, or even, you know, in my league, if I play ladder, you can go for whatever. But I'm talking at the top in tournaments. Even if you look at the landmarks, no matter what civ you look at, people always go for a landmark. They don't go, oh, I'm gonna go this game, I'm gonna go this game, I'm gonna go that. Some civs do that, but most of the civs have kind of set which landmarks you're gonna. So like Delhi goes Dome of Faith. Mongol can kind of do both, I guess. French always goes for the School of Cavalry. JD goes for School of Cavalry. English at the top level always goes for Abbey. Lancaster always goes for the castle landmark, right? So my point is, even with only 2 choices, players have almost exclusively the same landmark choice because it is just better, right? So sometimes that landmark choice will swap over to the other one depending on the balance and patches they do. But my point is, it's never really, I might go this, I might go that. It's usually pretty preset which one is better. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, well, Knights Templar have 3 options, which it doesn't actually complicate the choice more. What it actually does, it's kind of like, in a weird way, like illusion of choice, where it's like, ooh, I can choose between these 3 things, but it's never really a choice to begin with, right? So, for example, I've been testing a lot of Knights Templar Feudal Age specifically, and you have the French Age Up, which gives you the Chandelier Knights, which is just better than the other 2. I have tried all kinds of situations, I have tried all matchups, I have tried to make the other 2 work and to be good, but they're just not as good as this one. Like, this one is just better. So, at the top level, it's almost at the point where if I see someone doing something else, it's like they're trolling, because the other stuff does not work as well as the knight thing does. So, I don't think this is going to change anytime soon, or actually at all, unless there are balance changes to the other 2, because they're simply not as good. So, for example, the Axemen Age Up, they do 10 damage per throw, and they do melee damage. And that's all cool, and it sounds cool in theory, but they don't do enough DPS. And it doesn't matter what matchup you play, they just don't do enough DPS. And they're a very weird unit because they don't counter anything, they just do damage. But the problem with that is, in Feudal Age, the game is very simple. A spearman counters horse, a horse counters archer, or an archer counters spearman. An axeman doesn't counter anything. So, if the enemy has cavalry, why would you make throwing axeman when you can make a spearman, right? If an enemy has an archer, you're definitely not going to make axemen because they get countered by archers. And if the enemy has spearmen, you're not going to make an axeman when an archer does a way better job and is cheaper as well for that. So right now, they don't really have a place in the game because they don't really fulfill any job specifically. Like, they don't fit in any role. Now, you can say, oh, but in Imperial they scale a lot better. And while that might be true, in Feudal they're pretty bad. And when you're playing a game at a top level, you don't go, which Unicom do I want at 40 minutes? You take what is best now. That's how high level games go. You don't plan for Imperial, you go now what is the best, okay? And because of that, and because of that kind of gameplay and meta, Throwing Axemen will most likely not see any play in pro play, which is fine, right? It doesn't necessarily have to. And then Knights Hospitalier are interesting ones because they're actually very good in Imperial, but they're very underwhelming in both Castle and Feudal. Castle so-so, in Feudal they're pretty bad. And in Imperial, for those that don't know, they have 282 health with all upgrades, because they also get buff from monastery upgrades. So there are some matchups where you might go Knight Hospitalier because you can use them in Imperial. And if you're playing a matchup where the Feudal Age is kind of dead, like you can't do damage to your opponent, they can't do damage to you, you can go for Knight Hospitalier, and then once the game drags on to Imperial, you'll have a great unit. Now, the Throwing Axeman Age Up has a very good bonus, which is 10% melee damage. So again, if there's some specific situation where you can't do damage with knights and your opponent is not going to attack you, you can go for the Throwing Axeman Age Up, because you're going to Principality of Antioch, I think it's called, because you get 10% damage for all your melee units for the rest of the game, which is a very good age up. But the units themselves you're not going to see, and that's kind of the illusion of choice, where most likely we will just be seeing knights, because like I said, that's what you want. Knights right now, they're the best unit that you can have in Feudal from those age ups, and that's probably what you're going to have because top players don't plan for Imperial. Now, if you're lower league, I would say you can probably make everything. Throwing Axemen are probably the worst out of those three in Feudal, whereas Hospitalier Knights, you can make them. They're kind of men-at-arms. They're a bit worse because they have less ranged armor, but they are playable. Now, the reason why I think this will be impossible to balance, if you cannot, it's not even a point of balance, it's a point of meta and design. If you cannot sort it so that each civ that has 2 landmarks in Feudal, it's not go this or go that, depending on the game, depending on the map. Having 3 options is not going to make it any easier because of that. Like, yeah, technically you have 1 more option, but it will probably be figured out to the point of one thing is just better, right? Now, going to Castle is a bit different. So what I've discovered is going into Castle, there's some really interesting interactions, and in my opinion, some pretty big design flaws in the civ that I've found, especially recently, especially today. So, Knights Templar don't have hand cannoneers, okay? And they don't have bombards, and they don't have bombard towers. Now, they don't need bombard towers because they can actually make keeps cheaper, 600 stone. So they can kind of have more keeps than any other civ. Not having bombards and hand cannoneers is a bit of a different story. Now, if they didn't have hand cannoneers, but their crossbows were really strong, like Jushi Legacy, that's not a problem. The problem comes in their Castle Age Up, which is Genoese crossbowmen. They're basically their hand cannoneer in Imperial. So Genoese crossbowmen, when you fully upgrade them, they do, I think, 3 less damage than a hand cannoneer, but they have more range. So what is the issue with that? If you're like, well, they do, if they don't have hand cannoneer, but they have that, it's fine. Well, If you don't go for that A job, then you just don't have a hand cannoneer. You don't have a ranged unit in Imperial, which is, in my opinion, a design flaw. So you're almost forced in the current game to go for that A job because that is your only good ranged unit. You don't have another one. Normal crossbows are not as strong as hand cannoneers from the other civs, so if you want to have playable Imperial Age with an actual range unit that does damage, you have to go for that. Now, on top of that, their bonus is actually very good, which is your pilgrims give you 30% extra gold. So it's almost a no-brainer in order to get that, right? Another one of the A jobs is going for the Genitors. I think that's what they're called, which is the ranged javelin throwers that I found pretty underwhelming. The reason for that is I asked Dev if there's a different attack speed, because they're supposed to be same as javelin throwers from Malian, but I don't know if it's the animation, but something is off to where I feel, I have no actual proof, but I feel they take longer to grab the javelin and throw it, and are not as microable as actual javelin throwers. They also do a lot less base damage compared to javelin throwers. They do 5 damage in castle. 5 base damage and plus 10 versus ranged. Which, if you're facing a man-at-arm, you hit him for 1 damage. Javelin throwers from Malian hit more than that, right? So, I am red in this game, by the way. So, the problem with them is like, I mean, okay, they counter ranged units, but at the same time, they're not very microable, like because of that delay. I don't know what's up with them. They're not very microable, and it's like, there's some civs you want to go for them, like against OTD maybe, would be pretty good, right? Because OTD units are big, and you can counter their archers or crossbows and cannoneers with them, so I can see it being used. The buff that they do that you get with that age up is 20% damage and 1 health per second on sacred sites. It's not that good. Like, I can see it on some maps, maybe like King of the Hill, that would be really, really good. But on most maps, the opponent is not going to engage you right on top of the sacred site, so it's a, you know, Pilgrim's 30% extra gold, I would take that anytime. So I'm not super impressed by the Genitors, and the problem is in Imperial, just like Malian, you don't want a unit that requires you to focus fire ranged units in your army comp, because it becomes almost impossible to micro, simply because you would need to separate like 4 or 5 groups of them to target fire different range units, which is very good but not very practical when you play the games. Now, the last age up, or I guess it's the first age up, is the Angevin Empire. I think it's called, which is the one that gives you the Heavy Spearman. Now, the Heavy Spearman is a very good unit. Very good unit. Potentially their best unit from the whole Commandry system. Because it's basically a spearman with man-at-arm armor, and it doesn't cost wood, it costs gold, which you have plenty of. So it kind of just costs food, in that sense, right? So it's very good. You can spam a lot of them. They counter archers, they counter enemy spearmen, they trade okay versus man-at-arm. They obviously kill cavalry, so they're a very good unit. The only unit that actually counters them is the crossbow, right? And hand cannoneers. So they're a very good unit. You can even mass them kind of like a man-at-arm rush. And yeah, their bonus, on the other hand, is not that great. It's alright. Their bonus gives you 30% HP on your fortresses and your docks, which can be good in some situations, but it's not like, ooh, I need that. So what is the problem with them? Well, the problem with them is, if you choose to go Heavy Spearman, you do not have a late game ranged unit, because you're choosing between Heavy Spearman and Genoese Crossbowman. And like I said earlier, if you choose the Heavy Spearman, that's great. You have a Spearman that's really, really good, and then your Imperial, you're just without a ranged unit, right? You don't have that carry unit that has a lot of DPS. So that is the issue. So now you're in this spot where if you're playing against Knight Civs, you might be like, ooh, I should go for Heavy Spearman because that's the best choice. But by going the Heavy Spearman, it's going to be really good initially, but the later the game goes, you will actually lose in Imperial pretty badly because you don't have the backbone of your army. And this is why not having a hand cannoneer is okay if you have a choice to replace a hand cannoneer like Jushi's Legacy in no matter which age up you go for, but because your hand cannoneer is tied up to the Commandry, it creates a lot of problems in Castle Age. Okay? So, which is why I think there's a problem with design. It has nothing to do with balance. This is a design issue that the Civ is faced with. Because you don't want to be like, okay, I'll take this spearman, but I guess I'll just die in Imperial. That's not a good design, and that's not a good option to make. So right now at the pro level, a lot of the games that I've been playing is basically age up. Sometimes people go for push, sometimes they go to TC, but they age up with the French age up that gives you Chandelier Knights into Genoese Crossbowmen, and people actually don't make Genoese Crossbowmen at all. They don't make them at all in Castle. Because in Castle, they're actually not that good, and they're very expensive. They're, I think, 80 food and 100 gold. So they're very expensive, and they're not that good. They're only good when you get all the Imperial upgrades. So again, it's just like this design choice where you go for the age up, but you actually don't make the unit. But you use the bonus for pilgrims, and then you might die and lose the game and you haven't made the unit at all. Right? And chandeliers you also make only in feudal. So there's a lot of these like weird interactions where you're either not making the units at all, or you're making them at an age that you didn't get them at. Right? So that's a pretty big issue in my opinion, because I don't think a unit should be made and then you just give up on it completely, right? It should have place throughout the game. And at the same time, if that's not the case, at least that unit should have the place at the age up you age up with them, right? So if you age up with Genoese Crossbowmen in Castle, they should be good in Castle, right? But they're not. Or, you know, you might as well just make crossbows. They're cheaper, right? For what they do. And then in Imperial, I think the units in Imperial are a complete miss. And the reason for that is I personally don't like that Knights Templar, they have a Horseman, they have a Chandelier Knight, Chandelier Confetti as I like to call them, which is the feudal age up. So you have a Horseman, Chandelier Confetti, then in Castle you get Templar Brother, which is their Knight. But then there's another age up in Imperial that gives you the Szlachta Cavalleria, which is the Polish Knights, right? So now you have 3 Knights. You're playing a Civ that has 3 Knights, which is very weird, and it to me doesn't make any sense. And I talked about this a few days in my stream, like the problem isn't a Civ having 3 same types of units. The problem is there is no different situation where you want to make Templar Brothers, or you want to make the Polish Cavalry, or you want to make the Chandeliers. One is just better, right? That's the problem. One is just better. So if you age up with the Polish Cavalry, if you have the resources, you're just going to mass those. And if you don't have the resources, you're actually going to make Horsemen. So Templar Brothers and the Chandeliers are just out, right? So there's a lot of overlap with the heavy cavalry, and I personally don't see why they're unlocking 2 different heavy cavalry with their Commandry age ups. It doesn't make sense. I would much rather see them unlock a hand cannoneer or unlock an archer, like some special type of archer that, or just special type of ranged unit in Imperial. I think that would be a lot better fit. Now, that age up, the Polish age up, basically gives your cavalry 10% HP and 50% charge damage, which is, whether you're making the Polish cavalry or not, that bonus is very good to go for, even if you're just going Horsemen, because you're just getting a lot of value and a lot of damage from it. So it's a very good bonus. The Schlachtas are very good, but they're very expensive, right? But again, you don't need, and they're right here. You don't need to go for them because you already have Templar brothers, which are very good knights, right? So it just doesn't make sense. Now, the second age up is the Teutonic Knights. This to me was a bit of a disappointment because when I saw these guys, I was like, man, these guys, once you make like 30 of them, it's over, okay? It's over. They're very underwhelming, and I'll tell you why. They're basically a support unit. They're basically like a Mechter, okay? You're not supposed to fight with these. You're supposed to make few of them to debuff the enemy. So, what they're doing is they are giving enemy units, like an aura around them, they're giving enemy units -2 armor. The problem is, I think they're like the slowest unit in the game, apart from maybe elephants. Their movement speed is 0.9. To put it in perspective, if a villager without wheelbarrow is running, a Teutonic Knight cannot hit it. That's how slow they are. And I understand, you know, the whole point is probably like, you know, they're super heavy Teutonic Knights, so they move slow. That's cool for roleplay, but in actual game, that is bad. They're very bad. So you do make them. The debuff is amazing. -2 armor to a whole enemy army is amazing. But again, if you go for that, they're not your Imperial unit. Again, what is your Imperial unit? You don't have one. It's Genoese crossbowmen for ranged, if you go for it. If you don't, it just feels like you don't have strong units in Imperial. And it feels pretty bad to play Imperial with Knights Templar. And then the last age up, which I'm gonna be honest, I didn't go for it once, because I read what it does, and I don't think it's good. Basically, what the last age up is, what are they called? Twitch admins. We'll call them connoisseurs. Basically what they do is they cost only gold, the units. They cost only gold, no food, no wood, nothing. Condottieri, right, connoisseurs. They cost only gold, and what they do is they're very fast infantry unit. Very fast. They're like 1.5 speed. Horseman is 1.83, I think, or 1.86 or 1.87, something like that. So they're super fast. They're the fastest infantry unit, I think. So they cost only gold. So if you have pilgrims going, you can just print them non-stop. The problem is they have 1-1 armor in Imperial. 1-1. They have about 220 health, if I remember correctly. So they are an Imperial unit that die to archers. Which again, you unlock it in Imperial, but they get countered by archers, and they get countered by like, you know, any heavy units. So I understand their whole point is like they're fast as fuck, boy, and they're running around, and you can like raid with them. That's something I saw on Twitch. Yeah, you can raid with them. Yeah, I can raid with horsemen too, and they don't cost gold, and I don't need to age up to unlock a horseman, right? So that whole thing, you can raid with them. Who cares, right? Now, they do have bonus against gunpowder units, which I thought was interesting, but a bit of a weird one. Because if you think about it initially, you're like, ooh, you unlock a gunpowder unit. Or sorry, you unlock a unit that can counter gunpowder, specifically it's a melee unit. But then you think about it, right? Let's say the opponent has 30 hand cannoneers and 30 knights. In what world are you just gonna run past the knights and kill the hand cannoneers? In what world does that happen? Right? You're just gonna get completely blasted. And if you go with like, well, you can flank them. Again, you can flank them with horsemen too. So, I mean, they're cool, they're good, but they're not the unit to carry you. Like, if you make 100 of them, right, you're gonna die to archers. You're gonna die to men-at-arms. You're gonna die to knights. You're gonna die to crossbows. You know, and to be fair, I haven't tried this, but you might even die to hand cannoneers. Because hand cannoneer DPS is crazy. But let's say you do kill them. It's not gonna be them versus hand cannoneers. There's gonna be a lot more going around. So, I find their Imperial units pretty underwhelming because they're Imperial units. I thought they would be a lot better, and I thought Imperial units would be like, boom, now I unlock this, and now, like, if I get enough of them, we can do some damage kind of thing, right? This is why I think all these reasons that I just gave, I think is the reason why Knights Templar, I think, will be nightmare to balance. And not just nightmare to balance, but sort these design issues that it has. Another design issue I found out today by just playing, I played against Delhi, and if you guys don't know, you kill elephants with spearmen, but they're not your main counter, even though they do bonus damage. You kill elephants with hand cannoneers because they have high base damage, and you kill them with bombards. Bombards is the counter to elephant. They recently, a couple of months ago, they buffed bombards to do massive damage to elephants, right? Knights Templar don't have bombards. You just don't have bombards. It doesn't exist. So, if you don't go for Genoese crossbowmen against Delhi, you only have spearmen. And spearmen do not counter elephants. Because elephants can just run away, the ranged ones, kill all your spearmen and come back. So basically there's a massive, in my opinion, massive design flaw where you don't have a unit to kill elephants, which is crazy. And today I had a game where I literally made 500 heavy spearmen with just mass crossbows, and I would just lose my whole army to like 15 elephants because I just cannot kill them, right? I just can't. If I went for I'll just call them heavy crossbows, I would have had a better chance fighting against them, but still I don't think it would be enough because you lack bombards. And my suggestion to devs was to either give the axemen, the sergeants, bonus damage versus elephants, or give the heavy crossbows bonus damage to elephants. Otherwise, you just can't kill them, right? You just can't kill them. Or give Genitor, which is the range javelin thrower, give them bonus damage. Like give some unit, give multiple, not one, give multiple units that you unlock through the Commandry bonus damage versus elephants. Because otherwise, if you play against Delhi, you just have to pick the stuff that does damage versus elephants. Because other way, you can't kill them. And that's a big design flaw. There's a lot more of these problems that I found that I can't remember from the top of my head. But there's a lot of matchups that it's like, if you don't go for this, you actually just can't kill them. You can't win. You can't kill their units. And yeah, so overall, I personally prefer Knights Templar over House of Lancaster in terms of fun, in terms of gameplay. I think it's super unique, right? I said already, I think it's going to be a while till proper build and styles get figured out. I do think that House of Lancaster is more of a we need to adjust numbers kind of thing. Whereas Knights Templar is, the numbers are almost irrelevant at this point. It's these design things that need to change. It's like roles of some units I think need different roles because right now they have none. And I think Knights Templar as a civ has a lot of potential, but it's up to devs to kind of sculpt it into something that feels a lot better, because at times it feels very frustrating when you're playing it and you just don't have access to a bombard. And whenever you're doing a push, it's like you have to make a trebuchet and they're just like waddling and then they're deploying and then they're shooting once and then they're missing something. And, you know, like you try to shoot a tower and it misses and it shoots again and it's just like, God, why can't I just make a bombard? You know what I mean? It doesn't feel good in these kinds of situations. And I don't really understand why they don't have a bombard. Because I think if... Like, I don't know why they don't have any gunpowder units. If they didn't have hand cannoneer, and that's a design choice because you give their crossbows a unique buff, which they do have a unique buff in University for crossbows, but it's terrible. It gives like 2 damage and 0.5 range for like 1,700 resources, which is... or 1,300, something like that, which is crazy. I think not having hand cannoneer but having strong crossbow upgrade is fine, like Jushi's Legacy. But if you don't have that, then it just feels like straight up disadvantage. Not balance or you know, it's just disadvantage, right? Doesn't mean you can't win games, it just doesn't feel good. So these are the things that I think devs gotta address somehow long term, because I have encountered a lot of these games where in these kind of weird situations where it's not about oops I made a wrong unit comp or oops I could have done this. It's like oops the game got to this point and there's not a unit that I could have made in that situation in order to win, right? So that's kind of the problem. I don't think I think different unit choices through Commandry should give you different options. They should not be like, if you don't pick this, you cannot win the game after, right? So I think there's a difference. There's a difference between those two, right? So that's kind of my take on that. And overall, you know, we just had the DLC release, so I don't think the devs are like done with this with House of Lancaster Knights Templar. I do think there's, like I said, some glaring problems, but I think devs will hopefully take care of these things or address some of these issues, because I think in the long run, like if it took us 10 days to be like, yeah, this Commandry sucks, you know, a month or 2 or 3 down the line, we will have exact line of which Commandries are good, and the other ones will just not be used. So, yeah. Doesn't need balancing, it needs a little bit designing, I think, or adjusting in there. So that's kind of it. Overall, Knights Templar, I know people are probably curious to hear if I think they're good or not, because, you know, that's important to a lot of people, to know if a civ that they're playing is good or not. I think Knights Templar is the best civ on water right now, and I hope that they do nerf them. On land, I think they're very, very strong. I don't know where I would put them yet, not because I haven't played them enough, it's because I haven't played the old civs enough. I've been very focused on House of Lancaster and Knights Templar, and I've been grinding games in and out with them. And because of the Pro Scouts is completely butchered and it's just bad, I haven't played the old civs enough yet to kind of know where Knights Templar is, but I've had games with Knights Templar against other pro players, and then playing old civs and you know, playing Rus and China and Jushi and everything else, and I managed to win. And it didn't seem like, ooh, that was a, you know, I got lucky or something. It felt like solid games, normal games. So I think Knight Templar is quite good, and I think it's going to become even better once people get more used to the way the economy works. So there it is. Yapping completed. If you're watching this on YouTube, I want to thank you so much for watching. Shout out to devs. They made a very, very unique civ, and I personally love it. I always say my favorite civs are the ones that are completely unique, completely you know, different point of view. So I think they've done a very good job with that. We just gotta cook it a bit more. IMO. YouTube gamers, check me out on Twitch. I'm probably live right now. Before I leave, Marika, do you want to show your art piece for the YouTube gamers?
I'm still working on it. But guys, like, my neck is a little bit busted.
Wow, look at that.
My neck's a bit busted.
Love that.
The neck is not round enough, but it's fine. It's actually pretty fine. So
wow, she cooking. So she's been doing that the whole time. I didn't want to just like sign off without showing them what you've been working on.
Yeah, because people would ask into it.
Yeah. So that's it. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitch, keep going.